You are listening to Eastman's Flycast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastman's Flycast for you. So today on the podcast, I have on my friend Mike Green. So Mike Green is a wealth of information. He's been outfitting and guiding these rivers around southwest Montana for a bit. He just knows the ecosystem so well, and he's always been so generous with information to me. I can run into Mike on the road or give him a call, and he'll tell me, which hatches are coming off and which patterns are working, whether that's size or color or, whatever the case is, where the fish are laying behind the rocks in front of them. He's just always been so generous with information, which has helped make me more successful on the water. So Mike really specializes in dry flies and hatches, and he's really good at it. So fun to get him on the podcast today and have a conversation all about dry flies. It's real pertinent to the season we're coming into as we're coming into the summer months. I've caught just some awesome dry fly hatches here lately. I just got them so good, and there's nothing more exhilarating, more thrilling, more exciting than watching a fish come up to sip your bug, and especially like a great big old brown too. So I got to see that multiple times this spring so far, and I can't wait for the summer months as we get into some of these bigger hatches. I've been seeing brown drakes come off up here at the house. And, there's been some other mayflies, like some betas that I've got them good on, blue wing olives. I've seen like some darker brown mayflies that are coming off, and we're just kind of in our runoff season, and the Madison hasn't quite got dirty yet, but I expect it to the next couple days. But after that, after it cleans up, thing will be fishing, I guarantee you. And so many of these rivers, they clear and dirty at different times, and so it gives us a chance to kind of travel around Montana and find the clean water and go throw some dries and hopefully catch some hatches coming off. But this is a great conversation. I really enjoyed it with Mike, and sure appreciate him coming on and sharing his knowledge of these rivers that he's gained over the years, and his knowledge about dry flies and presentation and talking about fishing from a boat and wade fishing. We just had this great conversation. So I really enjoyed it. Let's get right into it. It's Eastman's Flycast. I'm your host, Brian Barney. Here we go. Okay, I'm live here. I've got my buddy Mike Green on from Madison River Guides. So we're sitting down to record a podcast at his place, and I've known Mike now for a handful of years, but man, you've been guiding on the Madison and grew up here, and you've sure seen things change, haven't you?
Yeah, it's really changed over the years. That's for sure.
Yeah.
A lot more people, a lot more traffic.
Man,
just a different world.
It is a different world. Everything's changing around us, isn't it? Still some good fishing to be had, though.
A lot of good fishing.
Yeah,
that's for sure. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, talking about the change. Society here used to be all agricultural.
Mm-hmm.
There was some traffic coming through for the park and whatnot, but there was just a handful of boats on the river, like 6 to 10. 6 to 10
boats.
Yeah.
Yeah. What year was that?
Well, when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I'm 53. So,
mm-hmm.
But not that long ago.
Man,
there wasn't that much going on. There was people coming in fishing, but they did a lot of catch and keep and things like that, and that world's completely changed.
Completely changed.
Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, the fly fishing's really caught on, and then guides, now they're passing new regulations. Those go into play here in the next couple of years, which seems to me like it was necessary. You happy with the new regulations?
I don't know. It's hard to say. You're kind of torn because you'd like to protect your business, and there's a lot of unknown variables just with that. But you certainly want to protect the environment and just what we have.
Yeah.
For sure. So do I think I don't think the rules are going to change anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think the numbers of people and it's all going to remain the same. It's just going to be spread out a little more,
mm-hmm.
Or concentrated on certain days.
Mm-hmm.
But I think really in essence, when I started guiding, I don't know, 5 years ago, 30 years, whatever it was, that's when they should have done something, right? Look, I'm not a fan. I don't know much about Idaho's deal, but my understanding is they broke it up into a couple of outfitting territories a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's highly regulated and controlled because of that.
Mm-hmm.
It was like when Fish and Game regulated the Smith River here when I was a kid. Phenomenal. And it's such a phenomenal fishery still.
Mm-hmm.
And a great experience, even though you could run into a herd of people going down the river, there's hours of nothingness behind them.
Mm-hmm.
You will not really find that here. There are definitely windows where there's not a lot going on out
mm-hmm.
there on the river for sure, but it's really a shame that it wasn't protected a long time ago, which, in the same regard, I probably wouldn't be guiding if it had been,
mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and they started passing regulations on these rivers that started seeing pressure, and even in southwest Montana with the Beaverhead and Big Hole and
mm-hmm.
things of that nature. But it really pushed a lot of the guide pressure, a lot of the pressure onto the Madison, and the Madison is such an amazing river. It's got so many fish per mile, and it's a 100-mile riffle. They love to eat a dry fly in it, and you can see
Sure.
why people like it and we're so drawn to it. But you're right in that when they started to pass these regulations, they should have started on the Madison years ago. But it's still a great fishery, and hopefully these rules and regulations will help protect it for years to come. But yeah, I mean the fishing pressure now, and you really specialize, like your niche for the Madison, I would say, and I'm kind of categorizing you, but it's like a dry fly specific summertime, and that's where you put the majority of your effort and your focus on the Madison. That's kind of what you've always known the Madison for, is a great dry fly fishery, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When I started guiding, the older generations that would have been my mentors, who a lot of them have passed away or retired since.
The first generation of guides on the Madison, you'd say?
No.
Okay.
But I guess some of them would have been.
Okay.
Actually.
Yep.
But yeah, those guys grew up, like we were talking earlier, dragging sculpins around and doing things like that. However they did that. And then they went in and they started fly fishing, and that's pretty much just what they did, in just in talking to them and with their experiences and things like that. Like, it's just such a gin clear river, and as soon as a fish leaves the bottom of the river and you watch it swim up through the column and open its mouth to take that fly, whatever it is, like, it's just so cool. I don't understand why I would want to do a bobber. Don't get me wrong, I do a bobber, but if given my druthers, like, it's a night and day deal.
The experience of watching a fish come up on a dry fly and eat it is twofold on a nymph take, or threefold, or fourfold.
Sure.
And so chasing those dry fly hatches is so fun. And I'm so into it too. I love watching a dry fly, and I love chasing these bigger hatches. But lately, like I was telling you, like the last handful of days, I've been chasing this little Baetis hatch and watching these big brown trout come up on this little Baetis, and it's like magic. The experience of watching them come up on a dry fly, like, that's worth chasing around Montana, and chasing these hatches, and also, a dry fly, like, you got to be such a patient fisherman. You have to wait for it to go off, or you have to wait for it to happen. And so, there's time on the river where I don't look up and I don't look at the mountains or appreciate the entire experience. I'm just looking at my bug or my indicator, whatever it is. Right. But with a dry fly, it seems like I take a little bit more in. Like, I'll wait at certain spots, and I'll just kind of wait for things to happen. And, like these recent couple dry fly days that I've got, the first couple hours, I didn't touch a fish. I didn't see a fish. I didn't tie on any nymphs. I was waiting to catch the dry fly hatch. But all of a sudden, I see those fish start to pop and start to grab it, and then I start to line up, my line. And it's really technical, too, with those small dry flies to get the right drift and to hook those fish. You got to set up on the right angle. Like I was talking to you about angles on fish just because you dry fly so much. But there's just so much that goes into it that it's such a cool experience. So I see why you like it so much, for sure.
Yeah. The hatches like you're talking about, there would absolutely be time to enjoy Mother Nature.
Mm-hmm.
And not that the Madison has hatches like that for sure, but typically when I'm guiding, say the middle of June to the end of September, I do guide into October, but I am throwing streamers at that point generally. They pretty much just eat a dry fly from sunup to sundown, and they're not that particular on our stream. I think it's probably going quicker. The water's moving faster, so they're probably more inclined to think food, not food. And is it going the right speed and over the top of me? Can I see it? Versus a slow moving river, they have plenty of time to nitpick it. On the Madison, they don't have that amount of time. So to me, it's a great beginner angler fishery.
Mm-hmm.
For a dry fly.
That makes sense.
They
have to make a decision because it's such a fast-moving river that they have to decide now and eat that thing.
Yeah.
And so it's more about the presentation than the actual bug itself. And so you mentioned a drag-free drift.
Sure.
Boy, those fish key into that, don't they? They just do not want that fly moving. If it moves at all or drags at all, they don't eat it. So that's one of the things that you think they key in on the Madison, huh?
Sure, yeah. I think to me, getting the fly over the fish is the most important part. Drag free certainly plays a role in it. Yeah, if you could be drag free, that would obviously be the best. Certain bugs like a caddis, sawgrass, things like that, they do kick around and skate. And
they're okay if they move in.
They can be. There could be days where they wouldn't, but like the fishery we were talking about, no. I don't think that would be a thing, right?
They're finicky in there. Yeah. Well, and you were talking about like spooking fish, and then the fish, won't eat any of the patterns. Like if you see their line, or what'd you call it, the line whip on the water, like you make a bad cast and you line whip and they hear that, then that fish totally shuts down.
Right.
And they may still sit there and feed, but they're not going to take anything that looks even remotely different than what they're eating on. That bug, that size, that color.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And especially like that fishery we were talking about. Here on the Madison, I would say that's not necessarily as big a component.
Okay.
Just because of the riffly nature that they might not know that you threw it a foot away from them and ripped it off the water 3 feet before them. The riffly nature of the water might get rid of all of that, might dilute all that nonsense that just happened. Other fisheries where they're flat water, it's not going to dilute that. It's going to show up right now. And like we were talking, that stream, it becomes a major issue. That fish will still rise and eat naturals, but probably won't eat yours ever.
That's for sure. Yeah.
And here on the Madison, I mean, when I used to do a lot of fly fishing schools, I would tell beginners very often that, you as long as you don't rip it off the water right over their face, you can throw 100 casts over the top of that fish, let it drift unnaturally over the top of that fish 100 times. And if the 101st time you throw it, it looks right, that fish is probably inclined to eat it. Not, I wouldn't say a 20-inch brown trout's going to do that, but a 12-inch rainbow, 16-inch rainbow, they would do that if you didn't spook them completely out of that hole, out of that line. Like I said, that other fishery, that's a different ball game.
That riffle or water texture, those fish use that to their advantage, don't they? They'll slide into shallow water spots and use that riffle where birds or nothing can see in. They actually use that for cover, don't you think, in the Madison?
Sure. I would believe that. Yeah, we catch a lot of fish in 6 inches of water. I mean, there's definitely fish, like during a hatch, like a salmon fly hatch, if there's a particular seam or something happening, something that's bringing that actual bug to that fish, they'll set up in water where when you hook them, I really wondered why I didn't see that fish. Like,
Yes.
part of him should have been sticking out of the water.
Like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you cannot see that
Mhm.
fish. I don't know what an osprey sees exactly, but
Mhm.
but certainly a big fish sitting in 6 inches of water here on the Madison, you probably won't have any idea unless you could see its shadow for some reason.
Mhm.
You would never know it's there.
Now, targeting these fish with dry flies, and I asked you this before we started, but do you prefer like a upstream 45 or a downstream 45, or what is your perfect angle on these fish? Now, fishing from the bank, and then I want to talk about the boat and going down and how you like your guys to fish. But say you found a fish that was eating on the edge. How would you approach that fish on the Madison with a dry fly?
On the Madison, for me, if I could, I'd love to get dead down below it and just add a little bit of an angle to it.
But not quite a 45.
But not quite a 45.
Yeah, okay, almost upstream.
Almost straight upstream, but let's say 15 degrees off at an angle.
How far will you throw in front of that fish?
Not very far. 3 feet.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like I said, they're just not. They're not as in, especially if you saw a fish and he's rising at a particular spot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just measure that cast and just set it up there a couple feet in front of it. And when it goes over the top of him, he'll probably turn and roll up at it.
When you say measure that cast, false casting above him to make sure you got the distance?
Yeah, false cast. Yeah. And I'll try not to false cast over the top of the fish.
Okay.
In particular.
Yeah.
But if you're just casting the tippet, essentially.
Yep, close to it or over from them or trying to find your distance for that cast.
Yeah.
It's tough when the pressure's on to make that cast. Like, I'm sure you see it guiding all the time with the pressure on of making that cast and making it count and getting that good drift by that fish. It's tough to put that thing when you want, especially when you throw a little wind in the mix, which we'd never have around here. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that cast for you and I, where I don't know, I guess it's like you chasing a big mule deer, where things just happen so naturally for you when you're just moving with the contours of the land and following the wind and all that kind of stuff, and knowing what you can and can't. You just know what you can and can't get away with. And same with us fly fishing, where you would cast. I'm measuring the cast and I'm paying attention to that stuff, but it just happens more naturally, right?
That makes sense.
Versus if you're talking to a beginner, like, there's a lot of explaining that has to happen, and the same with hunting too. In fishing, we learn from the mistakes, so that's kind of
these experiences go in to build our instincts, and all these experiences on the river, whether you with a fly rod in your hands or watching somebody instructing somebody with a fly rod in your hands, like all this experience comes in to your decision making process and into your instincts. So then when you go to catch a fish, it's not thinking about where exactly you want the cast or how you're going to cast it or how you're going to lay it. You just go about doing it. But when you've been doing it for so long and built those instincts, then it just almost comes natural. And you're right. Like, I can't overthink it or I'll screw it all up.
Right.
You know?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I just got to react and go fish that thing. So that makes good sense. Yeah. I like the way you said that. So, and then out of a boat, how do you like your fishermen to fish out of a boat? Do you want them way out in front of you to get that good drift all the way down? Or do you want them closer to the oar to sideways? Or does it just depend on the water? Or how do you try to instruct those guys for dry fly fishing out of the boat?
So I would say generally for me, I would love to have people fish way down in front of me. Mm-hmm. The problem with that for me as a guide is that I can't see what's going on. Mm-hmm. So they may throw it far enough away that I can't tell that there's a fish coming. I can't tell if he's there. I just can't tell. I can't tell if it's small. I can't tell if it's large. So I can't give any guidance in that regard. So because of that, I will have them throw more quartered downstream.
Yes, okay.
But maybe, from the boat to the shore, let's say, maybe 20 degrees.
That makes sense.
downstream. But it's right there in my window. And then same thing for our river, like we were talking, with it being choppy by nature. I need that fly to go over the fish. Like, I think that fish in general can't see more than a foot one way or another. There's certainly days where I've seen fish move 10 feet to go get a fly, but that's pretty rare.
Those are the magic days.
It's pretty rare.
Yeah.
I can't do anything wrong that day. So I want that cast short and sweet too.
Okay.
Right? 20, 25 feet, 30 feet at the max. But even at that range, like, things start happening, and a lot of my clients, I think this kind of happens with everybody, but let's say that if you're a 30-year-old guy, a lot of your clients are 40 years old or 50 years old, but they're older than you are. So a lot of since I'm 53, my clients are now 60, 70, 80 years old. I've got some 90-year-old people. But at those ages, you can't see. Yeah. So they may be really capable. Some of these people are world-class anglers, right? They could throw a bonefish fly like forever, but you can't see it. If you throw a hopper 60 feet on the Madison, you can't set that hook. You know, so I want it short and sweet. I want it very accurate. I don't want it kind of in that close spot, like within 3 feet of that fish. It doesn't really matter. It needs to be within a foot. Then if I can get it to go right over him, that's even better, because there's probably less of a chance that fish is going to refuse or not show up or whatever it is. So yeah, short and sweet.
That makes good sense.
Just downstream.
And I like that 20-degree angle too. I actually like when I'm rowing the boat. Some guys will fish too far out in front of the boat, way downstream down there, and I don't think you get as good a hook set on that downstream take too.
Right.
And it just seems like that more of that 20 degrees that you're talking about, or 20 to 40 degrees in that range, is the right way to fish it. But then you get guys too that'll be fishing in the pass. They start fishing behind the oar blade, and that drives me nuts. And what happens is they're just not seeing the run come. So they see the run, and then all of a sudden they're behind it, and they're really sweet run they wanted to throw in the head all the way to the tail end, they've missed it, or they're behind it. So now they're casting behind the oar blade, trying to fish the pass, not getting a good drift in there, and now they've missed the next run. Now they're behind on that one, you know. So it is like a mindset of fishing that 20 to 40 degrees in the boat. And the other thing it does, like you mentioned, short and sweet, like that, in that range of that 20 to 30 feet, you get to stage your line right for a good hook set too. I find myself fishing too far, like a hopper. You know, sometimes my dad will have me out in the middle of the river, but I want to fish that edge, and so I'll throw that big cast over there. But my line just isn't staged up for a good hook set. So when he eats it, I miss the dang thing anyways. You know. So when you are fishing that close 20 to 30 feet, it gets the oarsman and the angler working together to try to catch those trout, which is the biggest advantage you can get in the Madison.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah. It's definitely a team effort. It's pretty rare that the guide's, let's say, going to make you catch a fish without you trying, right? So you have to be positive. You want to have that mindset that it's going to happen, things like that. You're definitely working together. If you're not working together, if that guide is not working with you, he's against you, or she's against you, whatever it is. I mean, if the boat is set up to fish to the right and the angler throws it to the left, they might catch a fish, but it is going to be so lucky, or that fish is going to eat it within the first couple feet of that fly hitting the water, because the boat's not working to help that fly float. And that is, especially on this river, it is really critical. There's a lot of currents out there, even when you're fishing in the middle, where if you did throw it 50 feet, you would see your line instantly start bellying out in 5 different directions. Each one of those is a different current, right? That's creating drag or micro drag or whatever you want to call it to your fly. It may still be floating, but it might not look good enough. And then, like you said, where you're set up to hook them, I love the angle. I love that short and sweet. I always tell my people, I want to know as soon as that fish leaves the bottom, as long as I can see the bottom. So sometimes it's 4 feet deep and I can't see the bottom. Probably average depth of our river is more 2.5, 3 feet. So you can see the bottom a lot. But as soon as that fish leaves the bottom, I want to know, how big is it? I want to know if it's a 6-inch rainbow. Is it a 20-inch rainbow? Right? Or is it a big brown? Or what is it? Right? Like, all those critters eat the fly differently, and you can expect something different to happen when you pull tight to that fish.
Mm-hmm.
So that little fish is probably going to be fast. So as soon as he leaves the bottom and I know it's a small fish, I want to be ready to set the hook, right? But I also want to know if it's a big fish, at which angle is it coming at my fly? So I want to watch that fish open its mouth, come at the fly, whether it's turning towards me or away from me or downstream or whatever it is. But as soon as it ducks its head and turns away from me to where I can get that good perpendicular hook set to its body or its mouth, that's when I want to set. And then that's part of what you and I would just naturally do, versus with most of the anglers, we have to explain that, and then it takes years to develop that. But it's so critical to hooking.
That's those
fish.
Instincts, isn't it? And every fish is different in the way he takes it, just like
Absolutely.
you're explaining now. And so sometimes, like, you want to wait and let them take that fly and let them go down. I love what you said, like letting them turn and getting that perpendicular hook set. That's so important, because the hook set sucks when they're facing you or they come right at you. It's the worst. And so you'll actually wait for them to turn, and then you'll set on them. Right.
Like that you were saying, when you're fishing, some people are fishing in your boat and they're fishing straight in front of you.
Yes.
That is a hard hook set. Mostly, it's not that it's not doable. It's that most people aren't going to be patient enough to let that fish go down and turn.
Mm-hmm.
Or will they turn, right? Because they may just come straight up at you and duck straight back down. But until he's got his head down, you can't touch that fish. And it also hasn't closed his mouth. We do have problems here on this fishery where in the spring and early summer, the fish are quick to the fly. They're committed. They eat it. They're going to shut their mouth quickly. Later on the season, they don't necessarily do that. They'll come up, I think, and eat it and go down, but still have their mouth open. And you pull the fly away from many fish that in September that you would have hooked in July.
Oh, wow.
I have seen fish maybe 3 times where big fish, it was like you couldn't do anything wrong. Everywhere you threw it, like that fish was there. It came up legit mouth wide open, but stuck its lower jaw over the top of the fly and pushed it down and went down with its mouth open. And then you set and miss, right? I mean, I remember one, it was 2 doctors, one from Texas, one from Kentucky. And I'll bet you we ate lunch at Windy Point. We were going down the river, and I'll bet you in that first mile they saw 20, 25 bigger fish that came up to eat a hopper, right? The fat Albert hopper back when it was king on the river for a few years. And I told them after about 10 fish, I go, God, I've seen this happen, and I think this is what's happening. I think the fish is putting its chin on the fly and pushing it down, but they're not eating it. And let's say if they are putting it in their mouth, they're not shutting their mouth. So I'm like, let them think about how fast did that fish rise to your fly, and how long would it take if he just did the same thing to get back down? A couple seconds, right? Well, it's quicker than the classic God Save the Queen.
Mm-hmm.
So one guy just never could. He sets when they touch it, no matter what, right? It's just exciting.
Yeah.
It's things that you just never forget. And the other guy just slowly got more rhythmic about waiting, and then all of a sudden he started to feel fish, right? And then he finally hooked a couple of them and got them in. And it's just crazy. But I don't know what causes a fish to do that, but that can be really frustrating when they do that. That's like where we're talking about the ruby, where fish go into their instincts come into play, and they get picky, but they're still rising, and they're stones throw away really quick. Just, it's pretty frustrating. It's really cool. It's hard to forget those things.
Man.
Like, those are things that stick with you forever, but you can't do anything to change that fish's habit. He's just not going to eat it.
Right. It's so tough to wait on those things when they come up slow and you get to see them, and it's so exciting and you've been waiting for it. But and when you talk that God save the queen, they say that the fish eats it, and you're supposed to say that to yourself before you set the hook to give them time to go down. It's so tough to wait on those things. But it's good to like be able to adapt on the fly, to see what's happening, be able to instruct your guys. And the one guy couldn't get it. He just kept setting the hook the minute they came up. But the other guy started to get it, started seeing success doing that, waiting for him to take it. And it does come down again to those instincts, but if you can kind of adapt and pay attention to what's going on, it can make a huge difference. And there's nothing more frustrating than when they're eating your dry fly and you can't hook set on them, or you can't get the hooks into them. Man, oh man, is that frustrating.
Absolutely.
Do you like them to set the hook? Is your hook set the same on every fish, high and trying to get to them, or is it different depending on your angle and how the fish eats it?
I would say for me, general instruction, and I'm just talking about to a beginner, mostly I'm just going to say go up. Just come straight up with it. Don't get past vertical. I don't want the rod to load, right? Because I don't want to break it off. I still want to have the flex and the bend in the rod. But if you get past vertical, then the rod loads and it wants to start throwing things. That's when little fish go flying over the boat, or the big fish got away.
That's happened to me before.
Right, that happens a lot. But it's a lot of it's just experience, and that's part of where I'm saying, is it a little fish, is it a big fish? How's it coming to the fly? How's he going away? Right, that could dictate. Do I want to go left? I'm always going up. Yep. But I might go up and left or up and right. It just depends on if the fish comes up, and as I'm going downstream, if he comes up but goes away a certain direction, I'm going to go left with my hook set.
There you go.
The average beginner probably won't do that, but so I think they're going to hook more if they just go straight up. I've seen a lot of hook sets where they hook if you're front angler, you set over your, like, parallel to the water and towards the back of the boat. There you're just going to take the fly from them,
right out of their mouth.
I mean, unless the fish came up and then turned and went downstream at it, that hook set might work in that regard. I think you're going to lose a lot of power because you have a lot of line on the water during your hook set, but generally, you're going to take the fly away from most of the fish. But like we were saying, they do all eat it differently. And they don't all eat it either.
There's
There's a million ways for them to refuse and make it look legit, but it's not. So,
and also some of those small fish can throw you off too,
Oh, yeah.
Miss a couple of those and they can get inside your head where it doesn't even really matter. It's not even the fish you're really targeting, but just missing them like that, it'll kind of mess with your psyche. That's where that, you mentioned it earlier, like keeping a good attitude. How important is that for fly anglers? Like, you get to see so many different anglers come on your boat and fish, and that good attitude, it catches fish, doesn't it? Just good vibes in the boat, positive attitudes. Even if the day's going wrong, like it'll end up good in the end because he keeps believing and keeps throwing it to the right places, and eventually hooks up and makes his day or whatever.
Absolutely.
But I bet you see it all the time in fishing, just with attitude.
Absolutely. But, that's good attitudes, that would change the world. It's hard to have a good attitude all the time. But it absolutely, no question. I think in life in general, if you believe that it could happen, it's probably going to. If you believe that it won't happen, and why am I doing this? The fishing is one of the things, at least on this stream for me, where I hear people say all the time, what's the I forget what they say exactly, but what's the definition of crazy? Is doing the same thing, never changing the way you're doing it, whatever, something like
Yep,
that.
exactly.
Right. Well, yeah, but it might not necessarily relate to the fly. It might relate to your attitude and change the way you're trying to do it, right?
Yes.
If you have a bad attitude and the way you're kind of lackadaisical about throwing it out there, it's not good enough, right? But change your attitude and believe that it's going to happen, and it will happen.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
That's it.
And so people can look at it on the river of doing the same thing, expecting different results, and they're like, hey, Mike, this is insanity. Like, oh, how are we going to catch him? But I like what you're saying, that it's attitude and belief in it. If you believe it's going to catch a fish, you fish it harder, you drift it better, and you believe that fish is going to come up and eat it. And you believe when he does eat it, you're going to hook him with your hook set. Absolutely. And you just keep believing in it. And yeah, it's like fishing in general is insanity. Like you go a whole day and throw 1,000 casts for, maybe a handful of fish some days,
right.
But you keep believing in it. But I like what you said, like believing in it and fishing it hard and confidence in it, like it just catches fish. And it's the difference between catching fish and not on like a tough day of fishing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, to me, that's probably why a lot of people, we see, I would say a lot of days, I see 90% of the people that are out fishing are fishing underwater versus fishing on top. And I think it's what they believe in, right? If they've had good results in the past doing this, that's what they're going to do. But I have a lot of clients where we'll go down the river and I'll go, oh, remember that 12 years ago we caught one off this rock, or we did this, or whatever. It was a salmon fly hatch, or it was a hopper eater, a caddis, or whatever it was. It was a rainy day. Do you remember that? And they're like, God, I remember that day. I don't remember that fish. And I'm like, I remember that fish. That fish coming through the water column, the way it did it, I'll never forget it. And there's hundreds upon hundreds of those that I remember with a lot of my clients. I mean, it just is that I can't say the same thing fishing underwater with any kind of nymph. I mean, I've had some phenomenal days with a nymph. There's no question, and they were fun. But there's nothing that was truly remarkable about it. There's streamer eats that rival that. There's certainly tugs from a streamer eat, and certainly what you catch with a streamer can be phenomenal, which may be a lifetime goal. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of fish that I still see today that have come up and didn't get caught, that I just remember those, right? Like, it's remarkable. It's like watching that fish that won't eat because you messed up the cast or whatever it was, right? But they continue to eat on certain streams over and over again. Like, that stuff sticks with you. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. So that's why I fish dry flies as often as I can, but that certainly consumes most of my days.
So cool. Well,
Absolutely.
And it's so fun to go down the river with you too, just because you do have so much experience and have seen so many different days and different eats on different banks. It seems like alpha fish like alpha spots for sure, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like I catch the same fish in the same spot. It's like it happens once and I'll see that fish eat it. And then,
right.
I may not see it again there. I know he lives in that area. But, there is something special about that dry fly eat and watching it. It's like fractions of a second, but it's burned in your brain. Like, if I have a really good day of fishing, sometimes I fall asleep and I'll start seeing takes in my, right before I fall asleep, or I'll set the hook, right as I'm falling asleep. Like, it imprints in your mind. There is something special about it. There's nothing like a dry fly eat. That's the ultimate for a fly fisherman.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really technical too. It's you can mend big bugs, but a lot of those smaller bugs you can't get a mend in, and so you've got to throw that cast where it's going to go over that fish and not pull down. Like, it's technical, you know. Reason I like it, and two, there's so many different lines in the Madison that I'm sure you learn the way you want to go through a hole or the way you want to cover it, whether it's covering that bank line, the drop off, or some of these center buckets. And I know you've showed me some spots. You've got one inside corner that's just insane that you took me to one time, where those fish will lie in there behind those boulders, and you kind of told me what was going on in there. And then we hooked up in there really good. And you said, yeah, this is one of my money spots in here. But you get to learn these different lines, or you get to learn this river and where those fish like. It's a fun river to fish because they can lay in so many different places, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of, most of my days, I will go out and I'll have a plan in mind, whether it's fishing a bank or maybe my strategy is big rock boulders or super green water or really shallow water. It just depends. But once it works, I don't leave it until it leaves me. And some days it never does, and some days it lasts an hour, some days it lasts till lunch. You just never know what you're going to get. It is fishing. But a lot of that, it just makes it really special. I just love it.
It's solving the puzzle.
Yeah.
It's trying to figure out where they're laying and what they're doing. So I like what you said right there. Like the other day, I fished and we were fishing streamers, and we were going down, and it's a little bit colder water right now in the spring. And so instead of fishing the hard water banks in the pocket water where they'd be in the summertime, we were fishing those big inside soft corners. We were fishing tail outs, that wintertime water. And once you start to catch a fish or two there, then you really key in on the type of water those fish like and the type of water those fish are eating. And then you just get them good the rest of the day. But I didn't fish a hard water bank all day long, which is almost like the sexiest water to fish. It's like it's the water that I'm drawn to, but they were eating so good on that soft inside, and that's where those big browns were living. And so that's what we keyed on and fished those in the tail outs, and we got them really good. But you're right, you have a game plan for the day, or where you think you're going to get them or how you think they're going to eat, but you pay attention to all those eats and interactions wherever it happens. And then if you can transpose that water to the rest of the section, whether they're eating in front of boulders, tail outs, inside corners, or maybe they're hitting they've moved to the faster water and they're sitting in those pockets. But keying into that is so crucial for consistently catching fish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you better have a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D.
Really?
Do
you have to adapt throughout the day with clients? Like you go out and have a plan.
Right, yeah. Like your client might not be able to make a certain cat. Like they don't get how to throw it up against a rock, right? Like they want to throw it right next to it and run it down the seam. Well, that doesn't always work, right? Actually, I would say it rarely works. And it's, especially if you were underwater, it would be quite snaggy. I want to get away from the rock, or I want to be so far into the slick behind it. But, there's a lot of that. This river is as technical as you want to make it. You can make it really easy, and you can make it as hard as you'd really like to. I don't think typically the fish will make it that hard, but you as a guide, like I said, like if I'm fishing rocks, if you're out there fishing around me, you'll hate me because I'll be on the left side of the river for 10 seconds, and then I'll be on the right side of the river, and then I'll be back in the middle, and then back to the right, and then over to the left, right? But you got to work to make your money, to catch the fish, to show your clients what you're made of, what you're trying to get done for them, because it's their day. It's all about them. They're paying a lot of money. You should give them what they're after, I mean, and some people, like we were talking earlier too, where it may be the experience of seeing a deer walk down the side of the bank that could be what really gets them off for the day. Or seeing just the beautiful view that we just have. It just is there. But other people, it's about numbers of fish or solid. I want big fish or whatever. It just is what it is, But that's part of my spiel in the morning too. Is what do you want to get from today? Right. That'll go into my plan. That's the handshake at the coffee shop, where I say, what do you want to see today? Do you want to see a lot of fish? Do you want to see quality fish? Do you want to see great scenery? Like I'm putting all that out there, and then I'm developing my plan from that.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you want great scenery, like, I'm probably not going to take you into Varney.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's great scenery, but it's different,
mm-hmm.
right? But I'm thinking you probably think great scenery is big mountain peaks, so we better be able to see them.
Mm-hmm.
So I adjust from there. But my plan might have originally been in my head when I got up in the morning, Varney's going to be hot today,
mm-hmm.
and it's going to be big fish, right? And then suddenly Varney can be really technical, and I have beginners, and they don't care, and they just want to see something,
mm-hmm.
mountains and the majesty of the area, and that shoots my plan. I'm already on to plan B.
Yeah, that's cool to like cater the experience, like
yeah.
you say, cater the experience to the fishermen and what they want to see, and everybody's different. But there's so many nuances to this river, to all rivers, and the fly fishing that goes on in there. But I'm glad I'm not the only one that moves on to my second plan or my third plan or whatever it is. I had a buddy, my buddy Dylan was up last weekend or weekend before, I can't remember now, but we fished the Madison. We got him really good, and then we got him really good nymphing, and then went home. And so that night, trying to come up with a game plan. Well, what are we going to do different? We caught a bunch of rainbows, saw a couple nice browns, but it was like, okay, maybe we'll go up between the lakes, or maybe we'll go here. And so we shot around all these different game plans, and then wake up in the morning and go with a totally different plan over that system I was telling you about over there. And we didn't catch any dry fly hatches that day, but what we did catch, it's so low and gin clear that you could see those big fish sitting in those runs. So now we're sight fishing nymphs to the day cool. before. Like, I would have never told you that we were going to sight fish nymphs to these fish, but it's just the way our plan adapted and what we were looking for. And yeah, we saw a lot of nice browns that day because it's a brown trout fishery, and being able to sight fish them, technical nymphing, less leader length, no weight, just a bead head on there, and then the indicator, you couldn't throw a big balloon at them or anything, they'd see it, know, and so you're just a little bit of antron on there, and so we kept adapting our game plan, and then we just had this amazing day fishing. But that was not plan A the night before, or B, or even C. We just adapted it from that day going on. But I think that's an important point you make, is like just being adaptable, like being out on the river and paying attention to what's happening. Be willing to try different things, and try it out and see if it works. And then when it works, then you use that information to catch more of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In this time of year too, you could have some good dry fly fishing for sure. You experienced some the other day. I do a lot of nymphing this time of year for myself. Mostly I will tie a girdle bug on, but generally I'm just tying little midge patterns, things like that. But the way the fish, a lot of them are still in their winter lives, and so this bucket or that bucket may not have fish. They may be great buckets during the summer, but they're not holding fish today. But the third bucket that you go to, God, there's 100 fish in it. It can be silly, and there's definitely times, like there's a spot up around Varney where I grew up, where in the spring, in an hour, and I can, if they're gonna bite at all, if they're feeding on midges, you can put 20, 30 fish on the shore with you in an hour, and never move. Like, you still the same cast over and over and over again. Like, I mean, who doesn't like that? And there's times where, let's say you caught 15 in a row, you're 15 and 30 casts or whatever, right? Like, it's literally that fast. You have to be biting that fast to put that many in your hand that quickly. But I will walk up and get an angle and look in the water and look for those fish flashing underwater. And that's where I need to throw one right. It's pretty similar to dry fly fishing in that regard. Like, you know where the line is and all that kind of stuff, and you still have to throw the right cast in the right spot. You probably won't see the fish flash. Sometimes you do,
Mhm.
you know. When I first started guiding and we did a lot of hopper dropper stuff, I would tell people that a lot. Like, if you see a fish flash underneath the hopper, like, you better hit it.
Set the hook.
Yeah, and they're
Yep.
like, why? And I'm like, because they're going to turn sideways when they come up, or when they eat that nymph.
Mhm.
That's what they do. They don't lay on their side to eat that hopper, but they will show you that belly if they roll to you. You'll see that flash. That's, in rivers that are clear, that's a great thing to look for.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Especially in the spring, where, I mean, there's times where I've gone out in the spring, where you have cabin fever in between storms, but there's 2 or 3 days of good weather, and you'll just see the water really shimmering because there's 200 fish there, and every one of them's feeding. Like, and you just see the glitters just going off. Like, you'll never see that in the summertime. Not on this stream, you won't.
Their numbers aren't condensed in those pockets.
They'll be spread out
throughout the river, which is also fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, like, when you're nymphing, it sounds like you're really good at keying into this ecosystem of the river. Like, you're talking about throwing nymphs in the spring. Well, those are the bugs that are out. So you're fishing these the midge patterns that are the nymphs that are out right now, that those fish are seeing, that they're actively feeding on. I think this is really important on rivers, and I've been caught, I'll fish a girdle bug or rubber legs too, and they hunt for big fish, and I like that. But there's something to keying into the ecosystem of the river if you really want to see good fishing. And that goes for keying into the nymphs on that river that are happening right then. It goes into keying into the dry flies that are happening. It's like really tapping into this ecosystem of the river, because that's what the fish are keyed into looking for. So when you have that fly on, you just get them. And so, like, I think getting out of this habit of having these these certain flies that I like as attractor patterns, the San Juan worm and the girdle bug, and they all work, don't get me wrong, but really keying into these midge hatches, or, like on that river where I'm getting those Baetis dry flies. Well, a week ago, it was Baetis nymphs that were getting them, size 18 Baetis nymphs that they were keyed in on. And in that river, it's so technical that they're not going to eat a girdle bug or a San Juan. Like, they've seen enough of those fly down the river that you've got to key into the exact bug they're eating. And so, like, Is that just done from experience with you doing it? Do you roll rocks? Do you pump stomachs? Or do you just know the hatches and watch the bug life? Or how do you go about keying into that ecosystem?
So for me now on the Madison, I just know, because I'm out there every day, what's going on.
Yep.
And it's what happened in recent history, right? What happened to me in the last week, whether they're eating a caddis, and it's a brown caddis, or it's a yellow caddis, or whatever it is, if it's a mayfly, I know that you'll get a lot of bites, like we were talking earlier, where I'll say, maybe you were throwing a size 14 green elk hair, or chubby Chernobyl, or whatever it is that you think is a caddis, and you get a lot of strikes, like reasonable fishing. But really what the fish really want to key to is the brown caddis that's a size 12, right? And like we were saying, where if the two of us are evenly matched as anglers and you're fishing, you're getting good action, but all of a sudden you put a size 12 brown on somebody, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 like they're doing 3-to-1 numbers. That's the fishing you're talking about, where it suddenly becomes phenomenal, and you're talking numbers like 50 plus fish easily. 20 is a good number, 30 is a good number, but once you're getting above those numbers, like it's really getting good. You hear a lot of people talk about 100 fish days, but it takes a heck of a day to do 100 fish.
Oh my gosh, 100 fish is ridiculous, isn't it?
And when you're talking, let's say you had a really good day the other day. Excuse me. But if you're throwing an 18, anything at them, you're on light tippet, and it's a small hook. Like, that fish can break that hook or bend it. There's a lot of finesse and technicality that comes with landing that fish. And a lot of forethought even in should I hook this fish, right? Is there a reasonable place nearby that I can even land this fish? I mean, I'm already looking in a spot like that where I'm already paying attention. Like, where can I land this fish? Is this doable? Should I do this? Right? Like, that's like the hunter. The wind's blowing, and there's an animal out there at my farthest effective range. Should I do that? Should I take that shot? Maybe I shouldn't. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a lot that goes into that. Like, I catch a lot of fish over the course of the summer that have scars or hooks that are still in them. Mm-hmm. Right, and maybe some of those came from scenarios like that where maybe you shouldn't have done that, right?
Oh my gosh, I need to learn that lesson. I always think about it later or whatever, but yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The ethics that go into it, and I always, it's like casting over top of a log. Like, there's a fish in there eating, but you're never going to be able to land them or pull them over the log. Like, it's a lost cause.
Right.
But
with a streamer and 20-pound test, maybe.
Yeah.
But on 4X and some small hook,
that's fun though. The fight on those things on that 4X, it's just incredible. And I did, I'm used to fishing heavier leader, and a lot of times I'm spoiled in the Madison where I don't, 8-pound tests will do fine. It's not spooky to the fish, but the other day, fishing those dry flies, I was on 4X, and the first good one I had, I tried to surf in and snapped him right at me, trying to get the net on him. I fought him for 5 minutes, but so I had to have a little bit more finesse with my fight. And after that, I haven't lost one because I know how much pressure I can put on them, what I can get away with, and what I can do. But oh man, you talk about a fight, like out in that river with them, trying to land them and trying to get them upstream, and also there's something about netting fish when you're fly fishing. So this is another one of those instincts or time on the water and time doing it, but solo landing fish with your fly rod that's 9 foot long with a net that's, like a short landing net, man, that is tricky. I like to get those fish like upstream of me. So then when I kind of surf them back, I'm working with the current to kind of bring them back into my net, but that's a whole nother skill set. And then in the boat, you have somebody that hooks a fish in the front. Like, I'm sure you're really good at netting your client's fish and instructing them, but boy, you leave that client in the front to try to net his own fish, you're in for a rodeo going down the river. Like, that's a whole nother skill set.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the deals for us where it's easy to get through low brush because we're smaller people. Mm-hmm. But if you're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you probably can net a fish pretty easily, because 9 foot, and like, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
But for us, like, I need another 2 feet just to get to that fish, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you got to play that. You got to play that fish out, or you got to roll him over on the side and get his head up out of the water a little bit to where he's kicking his tail and helping you. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I do go through a lot of that on a daily basis where I say, as you're fighting the fish, once we're getting to close to victory, I'm going to have you lift your rod up over me, and I'm in the middle of the boat rowing, and then you're going to try to get that fish to break water and roll over before I net it. I don't bring him up by the boat until he's ready.
Right.
Like, that's a major flaw.
Recipe for disaster.
Yeah, the oar lock, the oars, like it's terrible, right? The edge of our boats, our river is notoriously rocky. It's all rocks. Every one of these drift boats that's made of glass or wood is just chipped up all on the sides. It's like a buzzsaw waiting to cut your line, So do not bring that fish up next to the boat until you've got good control over that fish. Don't kill it out there, but get control over it, and then bring it right up, and then there's a timing. There is a sense of timing to.
There is.
I don't want that fish 20 feet out there and up on top of the water, but at 7-8 feet, once he breaks water, like, boom, I'm on him.
Those fish have to be ready too.
Yeah.
And I like fighting fish hard, getting them to the net. Like I like getting the, I'm not going to sissy stick around with them with light pressure or whatever.
Right.
But those fish have to be ready to be landed too. And
Right.
especially a good fish, like you've got to fight him hard and be on him. But all of a sudden he'll start to tire and start to come towards that surface a little bit more,
Right.
and that's your window,
Right.
And they're not all going to lay on their sides and just come into the net.
Right.
Like they've got a lot of fight to them, but you feel when that fish is ready. And like, being an experienced angler, you can tell the guy if he's going to net your fish in the back, like, okay, he's almost ready. Here we go. Right now. Here we go. And then guy in the oars can push towards him once
Right.
and then reach for the net and then dip
Yeah.
them or whatever.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
that is fun. Those rodeos in the boat.
Yeah.
Do you like to play fish going down the river as you're drifting, or will you anchor and let your guy fight that fish, or how do you go about that?
So I will generally never put my anchor down
Yep.
to fight a fish.
That's what I like too.
But I want to play that fish perpendicular to the boat. So if you're in the back of the boat or the front of the boat, whatever it is, but a lot of our fish end up behind the boat on the initial run. So what I will row. That's when your legs really come into play when you're rowing. But I'm gonna slow the boat. I'm gonna get caught up with that fish.
Yep.
I'm really paying attention to how adept is this person that's stripping or reeling, or what can they do to keep and I'm kind of managing their line as best I can while they're trying to do it the best they can.
So rowing hard to catch back up to that
catch
fish,
back up to
right?
the
But not
fish.
too fast because your guy can't strip fast
Right.
enough to keep tight.
Right, yeah.
So you're monitoring all of that,
Right.
and you're trying to catch up to the fish to play him perpendicular to the boat, so he's not
Right.
way back
Right.
upriver or downriver
Right.
from you.
I
So
don't-
you want to keep even with him.
Like we were talking earlier, I never want the fish to look at me until the end. Right?
Okay.
One, they're going to panic and
Yes,
try
yes.
to swim away.
Yep.
But also, I feel like it's a bit in their mouth, right? So I've got better control over them if I'm perpendicular to them.
Mhm.
And so, but I also, it's a shorter distance to that fish.
Mhm.
So there's less variables of I don't know what's going on. So if that fish bolts and leaves and he's 40 feet behind the boat, like I maybe know that my reel's screaming, but I don't know where he's going, right? But if he's off the side of the boat, he's a lot closer. And when he does that, like you can tell, you can see things happening, and you can feel that fish is going left. And so I will bend the rod one way or another, whatever's appropriate, and that's part of the guiding part for me is the more I know what the fish is doing, because I don't have any of that feel that the angler has. But I can give assistance if I can tell what the fish is doing, because there's a lot of experience out there where, again, for you and I, that it would just be natural. Maybe I'm going to put the rod in the water, it just depends. But for my people to catch that fish more often than not, I need to be a part of that. Like we were saying, we're all working together as a team. If I weren't trying to help land that fish with the boat, we'd land way fewer fish.
It makes such a difference working as a team, like you're saying. Even for experienced fishermen, just working as a team, because I can notice a difference. Who's oaring the boat when I hook a big fish? My fight on that thing, and if I've got a good guy on the sticks and the net and that, like we got a good chance to land that fish. And if I don't, it's it's a bit of a shit show trying to catch up to that thing or trying to get them landed, because at working together, it just it helps out exponentially in trying to land those things. So I like that. So set the rod tip high, and then I kind of like a high rod when playing fish, but I'm almost getting away with this from streamers. Now, here's my theory on this, and tell me, listen to me and tell me if I'm wrong. But like on a dry fly set or on a nymph set, it's always a high hook set, or usually a high hook set. So you get those hooks in that top roof of that mouth. And so I'll play them high, and then I give them pressure high left or high right, depending on where I want them to go, depending on where I want to lead that fish. But on a streamer, most of the time my tip's down, and when I set the hook, it's almost like a sideways hook set on them.
Yep.
So I almost don't like to hold high on them. And the other thing about playing fish holding that rod high, it brings them up, like you're saying. And when it brings those fish to the surface before they're ready, they just sit there and head shake at you or alligator roll on the top, which is not what you want.
It's not good.
You know, so like keeping that rod low during the fight, especially streamers, but I'm even thinking now as I'm saying this, like nymphs and dry flies, so you don't bring that fish up where he head shakes back and forth right at you, throws that hook, or rolls on it. You want to keep him in the water and kind of wear on him a little bit, left and right pressure, and then at the end, when you go to net him, then that's where you go high and surf him up, and it's a now. Is that kind of how you fight those things?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I never really put that much thought into that part, I guess. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You definitely head shaking, rolling, all that kind of jumping out of the water. Like, it's cool to see all that, but it is catastrophic in the numbers count. No question about it. I would say that, you know, bigger flies, typically bigger tippets, streamers definitely fall in that class. Not that truly big fish, they're going to run no matter what. But if you hooked a 15-inch fish on a streamer, he might not do much of a run, right? So part of you keeping that rod down, I mean, if he starts to run, like you can tell when he just starts to weaken a little bit, you just snap his head and turn him. And it, right, like he's playing out just that much faster, right? Like you could put those fish in a boat in 10, 15 seconds sometimes. Like they just can't take it, you know, especially if you're throwing a strong 6-weight. It can be a game changer fighting a fish like that versus if you had him up in the air where you just bring him up on top of the like things could go bad with a streamer. And even if a streamer comes flying at you, like that's a whole another can of worms that you just opened up.
Those things, they can get some velocity on them, can't
they?
they?
I mean, I hope it's barbless. And
mine are always barbless.
Too big of a head on it.
Oh my gosh, those things can hurt so bad. And here in the Madison in the wind, you tend to hit yourself a few times before you learn. But and also if those fish get out on me a ways, then it is time for a high rod because you don't want it to snag on the rocks and you're trying to keep them off the snags and things. So when he gets way out on you, if he does, then I've got a real high rod on him, you know, trying to keep from getting snagged. But yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Sometimes you know when they get too far away, being high is good, but sometimes they turn and come back to you too quickly. So then you can't manage the line. So a good trick would be to drop it in the water. The water would pull it tight, right?
Yeah, drag.
And then your person rowing the boat can help you out, and then you could get it.
Think about it.
You could get it picked up, but no, that's absolutely, that all sounds good. Yeah, no question. Yeah, it's a great life out there. There's no question. It's a great experience. There's a lot of cool stuff to it. You give up a lot, right? And I've talked to my kids. Some of my kids have wanted to guide, and I was like, why would you ever want to do that? Probably for the same reason I did, right? Like, it's a great experience. It's a great lifestyle. You don't make a lot of money doing it, though, right? So that's where I told my kids, you know, like if you want to do all these things, you probably have to go out in the real world and make some money, and then you can go do it when you want to do it, right? But you won't have to row the boat. You'll be the one in the front of the boat.
Yeah, I've heard you give your advice. You've got 4 kids, and all really good kids. But yeah, I've heard you give that advice before of, you don't want to be the guy rowing them down every single day, even though that's a great life and you're on the river every day. You want to be the guy in the front, go make your money, and then the days off that you get, you're in the front of the boat. Or, I've heard you give that advice in different ways, in bow hunting and in guiding fly fishermen and that whole deal. But you do a great job raising those kids. So fun to get you on the podcast, Mike. This is the perfect platform for you. So thanks so much for coming on, sharing information. Guys can find you Madison River Guides, and I know you're probably booked for the majority of the year, but you just have so much great experience and knowledge about this river that it'd be so advantageous for guys to book a day with you just for the information they learn. And I know, we've only teamed up a couple days fishing, but I know I definitely pick up a ton of information just from your experience on the river. So thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it as well. It's been a great experience. Anybody out there that's let's say afraid of podcasts or anything like that, any of the older guys, because we're not as techie, don't be afraid. Yeah, go out there, give Brian a try.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it, Mike. All right, we'll keep in touch.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, that's a wrap. Thanks again to my friend Mike Green. Guy's really fun to talk to. He just knows fishing inside and out, and absolutely loves it. So, man, it's a joy to get him on the podcast and record one of these things with him. So I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Fishing's been off the hook lately, really turning on streamers, and then I was chasing those dry fly hatches for quite a while, and I kind of struck out the last couple times out trying to hit those hatches. They're tough to time, but boy, when you hit it right, it's like magic on the river, and I got it a handful of times. You heard me talking about it on the podcast, and then after I recorded the podcast, I've got a couple more sessions where I've landed some really good ones. And just to watch those things come up and eat a dry fly, so fun. But it's so technical to make those drifts to those fish. It's easy to mess up. It's all high pressure. You got one chance to lay that cast in there and get a good drift. And if you don't make that good drift, he may eat the next good drift. But a lot of times it turns off those trout or spooks them off eating on that dry fly. So I really feel like it's high pressure casting where you get one cast and then, man, I love just watching that fish eat it and then just waiting and then setting straight up and feeling that fish. And a couple of these things that I've hooked here the last few times out, just monster fish on a dry fly. And you talk about the fight of my life on 4X. I mean, running down the hole and up the hole, and he's trying to get into the rocks, and which can snap my tippet, and it just some amazing fights. And to land those couple to a net had just been wild. So, man, I've been having some awesome fishing. We're starting to get into runoff now, where things are starting to dirty up. I did see the Yellowstone was starting to clear. Drove by it this weekend and starting to clear. I bet there's some good hatches coming off on that thing. But all summer long, there's going to be some great dry fly hatches, great fishing to be had. So get out, soak in some sunshine, and hopefully get on some of those trout. So thanks so much, you guys, for the support. Social media, what am I trying to say? Podcast platforms, wherever you listen, the reviews, subscribing. It all helps me out so I can continue to do this podcast and bring it to you guys. And it's just been so fun for me to get these different personalities on and have these in-depth conversations about my other love, fly fishing. So it just humbles me so much that you guys like it and support it. And let's keep this thing rolling. And got to have numbers to make this thing roll. So I appreciate you guys for making this thing go. So thanks again. And with that, I'll check in with you in another couple weeks.